Today we're going to build a useAnimatedText hook that lets you turn this on the left here into this. We're simulating kind of a streaming text response, maybe the kind you would see from OpenAI on the left. And we're seeing how this hook can basically smooth it out. It can be interrupted with new chunks that are streamed in. We can pause, start it again. We can reset it. And we're going to learn how to build this from scratch. And then we're going to finally come over to a real kind of production application. This is an open source app, and it lets you ask questions. And you'll see it has some streaming right here for the answer. So we're going to come here right to where our answer is. We're going to try out our hook, and let's see where we actually use this. Right here in the UI, we'll change this with animated answer. And then we'll see as soon as we press this, our animated hook is working great. So this is a really fun one. I think you'll get a lot of use out of this hook. And as we can see, it works great kind of no matter which React app you're using. And so let's build this from scratch, starting with our demo app. To start here, I've got this little playground, and I can press play to start kind of a simulated streaming here using an interval and just some text here on the client. But if I hit start, we get a chunk, we can resume it, and we can reset it. And so here we want to write our little useAnimatedText hook. So let's start with just saying let animatedText equals useAnimatedText. This is going to be our signature, and it's going to wrap this text right here. And down here where we're rendering text, we'll render animated text. Just like that. And we need to go ahead and define this hook. So let's define it. This is going to take in text as a string. And for now, we'll return text. So we are using our new hook, but it's not doing anything other than return the text. And so let's start working on this actual hook. So how can we actually animate this text? Well, let's get a single chunk in here, just like that. Actually, let's go ahead and default this just to get started. Hello world, something like that. And we won't worry about the interval for now. So we have some text. We're passing it into our hook. And how might we animate this? Well, we can call .slice and pass in a starting index and an ending index. And we see here, if it's 0, 0, we don't see any of the text. But if I make this 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, then we can start to append characters. Basically, we'll return bigger and bigger chunks of the text that's passed in, and that will create this animation effect. So if we had some state called maybe the cursor for the cursor position, and we start this out at 0, and we make this cursor, then if we can update this state, 1, 2, 3, then we should be able to drive our animation. So how can we animate this cursor state? Well, I like using Framer Motion for animation. There's a bunch of cool options we have when we do use Framer Motion for curves and easings and things like that. So let's go ahead and bring in the Animate function from Framer Motion. Now, if we ever call Animate like this, imperatively, we need to do it inside of an effect. So let's go ahead and grab use effect. And we'll bring this in right here. And animate is pretty cool. We can actually just animate from and to a single number. And this will kick off an animation, but this doesn't do us much good. In order to figure out when this number is changing, we can pass an option right here to the third argument of animate. And we'll see right here we have all these cool callbacks. The one we're interested in is on update, which yields out the latest value. So let's go ahead and console log latest and just get some feedback on what this animate function is doing. I'll come here and open the console. And if I refresh, as soon as our component renders, check this out. We're getting an animation from 0 to 1, and every frame that animates based on kind of Framer Motion doing its internal thing with request to animation frame, making sure it's performant, 60 frames a second, happens outside of React's render cycle. We're getting this on update callback, which is giving us the latest value. Now, here we can see it go from 0 to 1, but if we want to animate this cursor position, we probably want to go from 0 to the length of the text, right? So let's just say to text.length. Now if we refresh, check this out. We get 0 up to 12, and 12 is the length of our string. Now you'll notice something interesting here, which is we're seeing this log twice, and that's because I have strict mode on. And it looks like we have a missing dependency here. So first let's fill this out. If text.length ever changes, we need to rerun this. But if I save that and refresh, we're still seeing 2 logs here. And this is actually strict mode telling us we have a bug, because we're only logging these once, right? So once we start kind of doing our work here to update our state, we don't want it to run twice. It's not the logic that we wrote. So why is this happening? Well, it turns out that Animate, this function that we called, returns animation playback controls. And this controls gives us a method called stop, which we can use to cancel our animation in case our component runs again, our hook runs again, and we need to start a new one. So this is actually useful, just like if you call set timeout or set interval and you forget to cancel it. You may have seen another video of mine where I kind of talked about that in the context of strict mode. This is React trying to highlight a bug that we have before we even know that we had it. So let's go ahead and return a cleanup function that calls controls.stop. And now if I refresh, check this out. We get our effect running, cleaning up, and then running again. And now we see kind of the behavior we expect based on our code. But okay, we're in business now. We're getting a log as this animation goes from 0 to 12. Here we're seeing decimals, but we don't really care about that, right? We basically want to just set the cursor position with math.floor of this latest value. And I think with any luck, we do that. Check this out. We've got some animation here. Let's go ahead and come back to our little static text. I'm just going to grab some lorem ipsum and change this with that. And now we can play around with this. That's pretty cool, pretty fast. Let's come here and add some more options. These are all the same options you're probably familiar with if you've used Framer Motion. Now it takes 5 seconds to animate this. We could do something like linear ease. And we'll see it take 5 seconds to fill up. We could do something like ease out. Make this a little bit shorter. There's also this circ out, which is kind of fun. So this is why I like using Framer Motion for this. We could even do something like a spring animation. Type spring. And look at that. Let's do bounce of 0.8. Oops, it's a little fast. Duration 5. Check this out. You can kind of see the bouncing ball here in the form of revealed text. Anyways, point being, I really like having the animation here in Framer Motion, translating that to the cursor points we're interested in, because needless to say, it gives you a lot of power and flexibility when it comes to how you want these to look. But for now, let's go with linear, just so we can see as we're building this out what's going on. And okay, this is looking pretty good. Okay, let's get rid of our kind of default text here and go back to our streaming example and see how it handles updating text. So now we are back to an empty string. And if I hit start, we do see some animation, but it looks like something weird is going on. Let's go ahead and refresh. I'm going to make this delay of our stream a little bit longer so we can see what's happening. And let's make the duration 1 second right here. And I'll refresh and hit start, and then I'll pause it. So when we get the first chunk, we see it animate. Let's get the second chunk. And it looks like what's happening is it's animating the entire string each time. And that makes sense because right here we're calling animate from 0 to the text length. So whenever the text changes, because we're streaming in a new chunk, we re-render this hook. It cancels the previous animation, starts a new one, going from 0 to the new length. But we don't want to go from 0 to the new length, right? If I refresh this and we hit start, our cursor position is right here inside of our hook. And if I add another chunk, we really want it to just start from where it was at the last time we stopped animating. So we need some memory. We need some notion of where the cursor position was so that when we kick off a new animation, because our text is changing, we just pick up from where we left off instead of starting from 0. And it turns out, even though this is very useful, being able to just call animate on 2 values, we can also pass in a motion value of our own. So let's grab a use motion value, and we'll call this animated cursor, and we'll start this off at 0. And the cool thing is we can call animate on motion values, and motion values are stateful. Again, they kind of run and animate outside of React, which is going to keep this nice and performant as we tweak the animations or use springs or whatever. But the animated cursor motion value is going to remember where it was when it left off. So if I just come here and I change this to animated cursor, pass this as a dependency, and refresh, let's try this again. So now we're going from 0 to 50. But if I press this again, check that out. We're just kicking off a new effect. Animated cursor remembers that the last time it left off, it was at 50. So now it's just going to animate from 50 to 100 or whatever the length is. And this is pretty awesome. It's just going to keep going. Let's go ahead and refresh. Let's make the delay a little bit faster. Something like 1 second. That looks good. Let's make it like 250 milliseconds. And this is the part that I think is really cool. Look how it kind of catches up. Let's actually come here and make our duration 8. So this is going to be like a long typing animation. So if I just give it one chunk, we'll see it takes a long time. But if I refresh and just let this thing go, look how our animation is kind of going faster and faster to catch up. And this is all happening really without much of us doing anything at all, because we've cleaned up our animation, and every time it starts over again, we're saying take 8 seconds to get from the current spot to the end. So again, if I refresh this, we'll see it starts off slow, but as the stream comes in faster and faster, it gets faster to keep up. And so basically, the reason I coded it like this, or just wanted to experiment with this hook, is because streaming, is kind of unpredictable. It kind of comes in at an inconsistent rate, or sometimes you're waiting on something, but then you want to catch up. So I wanted to see if there's a way to pull this off. And the way this is coded, we'll basically never wait more than this duration after the last chunk to animate the rest of the text. So I thought this was pretty cool. And again, if you kind of play with some of these using functions, and maybe you make this 8 with circ out, and you look at this, it kind of goes fast, and you'll see it goes faster to catch up. You can throw basically anything at this and just see how this behaves. And it's pretty neat. It's pretty nice. And if you pause it, this is still going to animate, and it'll slow down at the end because of that easing. So this is pretty cool. It seems to be working very well. Okay, let's come back and refresh. I'm going to press start. Actually, let's make this delay back to like a second. And I'll make the character as 50. And I'll hit start. So we're streaming here. And let's try hitting reset. And then hit start again. Okay, so that didn't seem to work exactly correctly. Let's go ahead and try it to change this to linear. Maybe we'll make this take 2 seconds. So now we're getting a 2-second animation. It goes a little bit faster to catch up. And then I'm going to pause and I'm going to reset. And let's try this again. And again, for some reason, it's not animating the beginning. So let's go ahead and drop a console log here with the cursor position. Cursor. And see if we can get a sense of what's going on. I'm going to go ahead and clear the console, refresh. And, oh, it looks like, first of all, we're starting the cursor at 3. I think that was just from our debugging. So let's go ahead and start that at 0. Now, if I hit start, we'll see we animate that cursor up. We're seeing this second object from strict mode, but that's fine. Just making sure that our render function is pure. So we're at 50 right now. And if I press this again, we see it going up to 100. That all seems good. Now what happens if I hit reset? Let's go ahead and clear this. We're at 100. Let's click reset. Okay, so we're animating back down to 0. And if I were to start and then press reset and then press start, you can see we were animating down to 0. And then when I hit start, we were kind of at 40 or somewhere in between. And that's why we don't get that animation at the beginning of the new text. And the reason for this is if we look at this code, let's say we re-render with a text of empty string. So normally the text is kind of being appended, but now we're resetting, we're setting a new string, you can imagine, and really this cursor is currently at like 50. We're setting a new string, let's say the empty string, we're kicking off a new effect, and we're animating it from 50 to the length, which is 0. So that's why this is not working. And conceptually, what we want to know is when our hook re-renders, is this text identical to the previous text in the sense of some sense of identity? It's being appended to. Is it the same string of text, it just has more at the end, in which case we want to keep animating from the current cursor position? Or is the text completely different, in which case we kind of want to reset our system. We want to reset our cursor position, and we want to reset our animated cursor motion value. And so this is actually a great use case for this part of the React docs, which is called storing information from previous renders. So I'll link this in the description so you can read it after this video. It's really worth understanding, I think, but let me show you how it works kind of in the context of our code right here. So we need to compare the previous text with the current text, right? And specifically, we want to see if the current text, the new text that we're passing in, starts with the previous text. So this is an example of kind of using information from the last render with this one. And if we can capture this, then we can know if we're dealing with a completely new string or if we should just keep on going. And so the way you do this, anytime you need some state based on the previous render, is to do it just like this. First, we'll create a new piece of state called previous text. This is going to default to the text. And now we can do this little trick. If the previous text is not equal to the current text, then we'll set the previous text to the current text right here in render. And we can also do anything else we need to, such as capture this logic right here as part of this render. So let's actually bring this up right here. And we want to know if it starts with the previous text or not. And we need to capture that in another state variable. So let's create another state variable and we'll just call it isSameText, something like that. And this will be true. And right here, we can just set isSameText to this expression right here. So this is pretty interesting. Let's go ahead and log isSameText and just see the behavior. And I'll get rid of this log right here, this cursor. Let's refresh. We see isSameText is true. That's the default. I hit start. And every time we get a chunk, we're seeing it's true, right? Now if I hit reset, look at that. We have isSameText is false. So this little piece of logic lets us know if this text is changing in a way that is the same or it's different. And now we have this little opportunity here to come and reset our cursor so that we don't have that extra animation. I know that was kind of a lot. I think if you read the docs or watch that part back, it'll make more sense, but it's a nice little trick right here during render to be able to compare the previous value of a piece of state, a state variable, with the new value, and then store some information about the difference. You might remember things like get derived state from props, or you might try to do this sort of thing in an effect, but the docs explain why this is kind of a better approach than that. And the nice thing is when you call set state during render like this, React will actually go through and keep rendering, but it won't commit. It'll just rerun this, which is why we have this condition, because on the next time we'll have this variable set, we'll get a full render of our component, of all of our components, and everything will be in sync with each other. So this is pretty neat. Now that we know when we press reset, we have this variable isSameText and it goes back to false. What do we want to do? Well, we want to reset our cursor to 0 and we want to set our animated cursor to 0 as well. Let's start with the cursor. This is state, so we probably want to set it right here once we flip this variable. Let's just go ahead and say if this is not true, we also want to set the cursor back to 0. And Now we have this text right here is same text. We want to reset the animated cursor. These motion values, you can think of them like refs basically. And so you don't want to set or update them, or basically you don't want to read or write to them during render. You want to do it in an effect. So that's why we have this kind of state variable, which we can use right here to say if it's not the same text. So if we've basically hit reset or send some new string, we want to go ahead and call animated cursor dot jump to 0. And this jump is going to basically just flip it back to the beginning and let our new animation start from 0. So let's do this, and let's go ahead and update these dependencies. Let's zoom out, kind of see what we have here. Still looking not too bad, 75 to 107, so it's about 30 lines of code. If I refresh, hit start, that looks good. I can pause, start again. If I hit reset and then play, then this looks good. And again, if I were to go ahead and console.log latest right here, now we should see this animation. But if I hit reset, we just jump to 0. And so our cursor's back. And same thing if we were to console.log the actual cursor position in the React state. Refresh, we'll see just the integers. Pause. And now when we pause, we're at 150. I hit reset, and we just jump back to 0. So when I first wrote this, I actually tried just using like a key from the outside interface. So you could do that. Like when you hit reset, just basically kind of reset this whole hook. You can kind of think about how we do that with forms sometimes. Sometimes you just want, like, conceptually, you have a new piece of state. You want to throw all that internal state away. But I think this is nice kind of just to pre-bake this into this hook, because if the text doesn't start out with it, then you probably don't want to animate between it, right? And so now we have this kind of robust little hook right here. It's 30 lines of code, and this is how we use it. Text to useAnimatedText, and this is pretty cool. We can customize the duration if we want it to be a little bit faster. We could do ease out if we want it to be a little nicer. And even if we basically hit this with like 250 milliseconds for the delay, it looks pretty good. Now, one final thing that I thought was a fun way to experiment with this is, instead of splitting this up, animating it by character, you could animate it by word. So let's see how we would do this and see how we would split this up by word instead of by character. If we look here at our code, instead of slicing this text like this, we first want to basically split this by white space. Then we want to grab from 0 to cursor. And then we need to join this again by exactly what we split it up by. So I think that's all we need there. And where else are we using length? Right here. We basically want to animate it not to the length of the string, but how many words there are. So this is going to be the same thing. Text.split by that, and then calculate the length. Let's go ahead and delete this autocomplete. By the way, I always like auto-completing my use effects. If I ever can't just auto-complete it, it usually means that there's something I'm missing in the code. I think you should basically write React like that, and I think it will help when you use things like the compiler. I think this is basically the way to do it. So there were some versions of this where I was accessing cursor in here, and then when I was setting it, it was rerunning it. And so that's just a little point I wanted to make. Also, always autocomplete your dependencies for use effect. But now that we have split, I think that should work. Let's go ahead and try this out. Reset. So now let's slow this down a little bit, maybe 3 seconds. Reset. This is what it looks like with word animations. So pretty cool. And again, you can see if this is what your LLM was giving you, this is how you can smooth it out. And maybe you have much bigger chunks, like 150, like this. I think this is pretty pleasant, actually. It makes it much nicer. And I've been working on some projects that use different open source LLMs, and they all have very kind of unpredictable and different behavior when it comes to how fast they come through, how big the chunks are. And I think this is a great example of, using React, which is a tool for UI, for the front end. This idea of how fast to reveal the text, how it can be interrupted and it can catch up and you can code all these different behaviors. It's really a UI concern, and I love that we can solve this with something like a hook that works regardless of what the source API is doing in terms of its response, in terms of how fast a stream is. This is really like a great use case for React to solve this problem. You might think, well, we could just throttle it on our back end or kind of buffer it up and then really, but this really shouldn't affect, the back end shouldn't affect this at all. This is really a pure UI concern. And I love that React gives us the tools to make a hook like useAnimatedText. So just before we go, let's look at this and just pull this out. Right here, we made this split by space. Let's go ahead and just throw this in a variable just so we can see the difference. Let delimiter, we'll call it. We'll make this a space, but now we can use it right here, here, and here. Again, we're splitting by word, but if we were to go back and split it by character, the delimiter would just be an empty string, and that's what that looks like. So pretty cool. As a final kind of wrap up here, let's take this useAnimatedText hook and bring it into an app that I've helped my buddy Hassan work on. It's called TurboSeek, and it's actually open source. So I have it pulled down right here. And the way this works is kind of like a Perplexity clone built using open source LLMs like Llama and Llama 3.2. And you can ask it a question. You press this, and let's zoom out a little bit. You see it fills in the answer here. And so if we try this again, you'll see that we're just kind of letting the LLM fill up the response right here. Let's just see if we can actually use our new hook in this project. So I'll create hooks, useAnimatedText. Let's go back and copy our code. Go ahead and add all these missing imports. I actually like to do this by grabbing all the imports from here, pasting them in, organize imports, boom. Export function, useAnimatedText, that looks good. And let's come find the page. And this looks like answer. So we probably have some answer text right here. That looks good. Let's say const animated answer equals useAnimatedText answer. Okay, nothing's breaking yet. Here's the current behavior. Let's see where we're rendering answer. Let's just pass in animated answer. Come back here, try it again. Look at that. That's pretty awesome. Single line of code. We have full control over how this animates, but I think this looks pretty good. This is animating by character. It looks a lot smoother. You can imagine doing it elsewhere in the UI. We can come here and change the delimiter to a new word if we wanted to. Explain the theory of relativity. Now it's going by word. It's just a much more consistent. Again, it catches up. I think this is a pretty awesome hook that we ended up with. Pretty sweet to see it work in a real production app. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope you learned a thing or two. If you like the channel and are interested in more stuff like this, I'm working on a new course over on Build UI, which talks about exactly this sort of thing. This is a good example of kind of wrapping this imperative code, kind of this animate function right here inside of a declarative interface. useAnimatedText, which is reactive and it plays well in any React app. So this is one of the main topics I'm going to be covering in this course. It's called Advanced React Component Patterns. And I'll put a link up to that in the description. We're going to be releasing that in the next month or so. I'm excited for that one. So if you enjoyed this and you're looking for more stuff like that, you want to support the channel, check that out. Otherwise, if you had any questions about any of this, let me know in the comments. If you made it this far, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.